that's a bummer. And so is that. Negative. Angry. Hateful. No.
Tired of negative content that brings you and your algorithm down, ruining your day? Don't be that guy. Level up your screen time. Welcome to 216 Creator Studios. We are fun, funny, informational, educational, entertaining, motivating, and we are here for your listening and viewing pleasure. Make sure you check out The Grounds every Friday morning. We live stream at 7:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. Kent, Drew, Scott, Steve, and Kelsey will make you laugh, cry, and learn something new. Or how about Let's Talk Local, a community podcast spotlighting local businesses and events and the stories of how and why they do what they do. Or how about Around the Piano, where Tim Paul and Drew Cappuccino interview new, talented musicians as well as some of the great titans of the music industry. And if none of that strikes your fancy, how about one of my personal favorites, The Stories of the Paranow. Watch as Seabass, and myself research, react, and judge some of the craziest paranormal articles and videos that we can find on the net. And if none of those strike your fancy, we have so many other shows to watch, and we're bringing new ones in all the time. So go to YouTube, 216 Creator Studios, hit that live tab, hit that like button, that share button, that comment button, that subscribe button, ring that bell so that you never miss an episode. Our shows are broadcast on youtube.com/@216thenet/streams. Find us, follow us, and get inspired today. 216 Creator Studios, content that moves you forward.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Drew Cap, not as in captain, but as in cappuccino. Hey, listen, if you like what you see here today on the old Roger That Chronicles, make sure you go to our Google box, hit that YouTube, go to 216 Creator Studios, make sure you like, share, subscribe, ding that bell for future notifications. We appreciate everybody's support. Today we are flying high with the Air Force. I couldn't tell you how excited I am. We have a pilot. Listen, I always wanted a plane, but I could barely get down my stairs. So it makes me nervous, and I'm afraid of heights. So that doesn't really work for me, but I love hearing the stories. We have some talent here today. Chris at the table doing remote today.
Yes, we are.
That's awesome. Hey, how we haven't seen each other for a minute, man. How you been?
Oh, pretty good. And look, winter came back.
It didn't. It just hid for a while. I'm pretty sure God is messing with his thermostat just to make he's laughing,
Keeping us on our toes.
That's true. Snow tomorrow. I heard snow and rain tomorrow here in the old Midwest where we get but winter and construction. So I'm okay with it because listen, this is what I do for a living. So I'm indoors most of the time anyway, having a lot of fun with people like you. So why don't we talk about what we're talking about today? What do you got for us today, Chris?
So we are continuing on our series and just learning about the different branches. So today we have Air Force. And so we have Lieutenant Colonel Christi Lakey with us today. Welcome.
Awesome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yes, thank you for being here. We appreciate being on the show. We are NLM&O. We're an organization for veterans, helping them transition from the military life to civilian life. And so we are just sharing stories here and seeing where things go.
That sounds good. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, good. We'll go ahead and get started. And why don't you share a little bit about your journey of why you wanted to go into the Air Force and what that looked like?
Yeah, it was well, I was a teenage girl at one point, and some people think I always wanted to be a pilot or that all pilots have always wanted to be pilots their whole life. But my dad was a pilot, and so of course I didn't think that was very cool because my dad was a pilot. So, he convinced me at some point to at least try to fly. So there's something called your initial solo that you can do after about 10 hours of instruction, of dual instruction, you with another pilot in the plane. And he was wise enough to not do it himself, to have, I went to Civil Air Patrol encampment and flew with another instructor that my dad was teaching other kids there actually. And I was flying with another pilot, and I soloed after that, and that solo when I was 16 years old is what convinced me that it was actually fun and that my dad was cool, so he was pretty happy about that. So in the plane, I vividly remember, even though that was decades ago, like, just having the best time, like, it was fun. And, so you have to be a little adventurous to be a pilot, and I just fell in love with it then. And then, I was in JROTC at the time, in Army JROTC, which is actually where I met my husband, which is crazy. But it convinced me that I wanted to be in the Air Force. My dad was also very smart, and he went the civilian route to be a pilot. And he convinced me that the military might be a better route. And at that time, which was back in 2003, the airlines were not hiring well, and it would have been very difficult for me to have a living wage after school at that point. So he convinced me to go to the Air Force, well, to be in the military. And then, like, I think God takes my story, and I went to Baylor University that at the time only had Air Force ROTC. So luckily, God's gentle nudge got me into the Air Force. Thank him so much for that, because the Army would have been a terrible idea, which is where I originally wanted to go, into the Army to be an aviator, which, looking back, like, that would have been a lot harder. Like, the Air Force is, um, they call it the chair force for a reason, like, yeah, I mean, people do hard jobs, don't get me wrong, but compared to the other branches, we have a really good deal, that I have seen anyway. And married to my husband, who was a Army Guardsman, enlisted, is total, like, opposite end of that spectrum. So I think that I ended up in a great place. And from there, luckily, I was blessed again to get a pilot slot, which not everybody who wants to be a pilot is a pilot in ROTC or through the commissioning sources. So another blessing there. And then, I went to, I graduated from college, got commissioned, went to undergraduate pilot training, and the rest is kind of, there's a lot to this story. So I don't know how far you want to go at the beginning. That's the long story.
Time. So I do have to go back a little bit, only
Sure.
because we actually know each other. And yeah, her dad actually took like a small church group that we were in up in a little airplane. And so it was just like one or two kids went up in the plane, and he flew around, came back and get a couple more and would fly around,
Yeah, my anxiety is going through the roof right
It's so cool though. Like, my dad, this comes full circle right now, actually, because he bought up a Cessna 180 and took my son, who's 13 and who's taller than me now, flying, and my son is now in love with it. So I'm like, we have or I had a plan, like, a slow indoctrination plan to try to get him to be a pilot. It's working, I think.
There was one time I was on a little single prop, kind of noise, right? And spotted duct tape on a wing, and I was like, "Is that standard?"
It's called speed tape.
That's right. I'll excuse that. It doesn't matter if it's a car.
Literally, it was MacGyver flying my plane. And listen. So I have a question. It's a little bit of a silly question, but at the same time, holds true. So my cousin is Air Force still in. I think this is 25 years in. He started off as a crew chief on the C5, and worked his way through to a bunch of things that he couldn't talk about. He's out in Poland right now.
Oh, cool.
Great dude. But I'm like, so a brown bomber jacket, mirrored sunglasses, and drives a motorcycle. I'm like, all right, Tom Cruise. So I'm starting to wonder if all pilots have that. So do you have the mirrored glasses, the bomber jacket, and the motorcycle?
I have horses, which I think are the girl version of a motorcycle. And yes, I do have some really good aviators. I don't wear my leather bomber jacket unless I'm in uniform and it's cold.
There you go. Right. How cool is that? What is the plane of choice for you?
You mean like out of all the planes ever existed, what would I fly? Or the ones that I have flown, what would I choose?
What you have flown and what's the dream plane?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's probably the same thing, honestly. So I flew 3 planes in the Air Force, and I still actually am a reservist I fly the T6. So I flew the T1 first, which was like a business jet. And I'm trying not to use acronyms, so I'm being careful about not a FAPE, it's called a FAPE, but it's a first assignment instructor pilot. So I was instructing in that one first, it was good. But it wasn't very fun. And then the EC-130 is what I flew next, which was a big, like a C-130, but electronic combat variant of it. And that was good in a different way. It was a big plane. And for Delta, I fly the 757 and the 767, and that is fun too. Some people's dream plane is the 757, but I currently fly the best plane, in my opinion. It's a T6. It's a very high performance airplane. So it does aerobatics, which is really fun to go upside down, do loops and barrel rolls and cubinates and stuff like that. And I call it the go-kart, but the boys that I work with, or the men, they get mad when I say go-kart because it's a lot of fun and it just turns on a dime. It's not fast enough to make you pull a ton of G's, but it pulls we pull 4 G's daily. So it makes you feel like a real aviator. I feel like it's a fighter light because we do formation too in it. I would like to fly a 5th gen fighter just once because it sounds fun to fly a F-22 or an F-35 and go supersonic. I would love to do that one time because they work far too hard in an office or in secrets in the vaults and stuff like that. I don't want to brief for 3 hours and debrief for 2 hours. We pre-brief 1 hour, debrief maybe half an hour. It's the perfect fly for an hour and a half. It's kind of the perfect middle ground, in my opinion.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm looking up pictures of everything that's happening here.
Oh yeah, I know.
It's 3572. I'm gonna have to look that up.
The T6, yeah, it's a turboprop. I think it's cute. It's the Air Force's primary trainer, actually. So every Air Force pilot has flown the T6 now. So it's kind of cool to be like the genesis of the aviators of the Air Force. Well, we could go on about they're trying to get rid of it in about 10 years or maybe less, which is sad, but yeah. I know. But for now, it's pretty great.
So,
I'm sorry. One more plane question because I'm a nerd for planes. I just don't fly them or want to be in them. And so, vintage planes.
Oh, yeah.
Favorite vintage. Mine is the Corsair.
I love the Corsair. I would love to fly one of those too.
I usually hear Mustang.
Yeah, Mustang. I like the Mustang.
Yeah. The Corsair, that wing design, it was always a catcher for me.
Yeah, it's also dangerous from what I had heard.
Awesome. That's not good.
You're like, I changed my mind. I don't want to go in that one.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. So, Did you have a specific vintage plane, and have you flown one?
No, I haven't. I have a friend actually who owns one or two. I would love to fly some sort of open wing biplane or open canopy biplane. So there's nothing, it's just fresh air and the wings in front of you. And it would be, he, I think, is part owner of one. So maybe eventually I'll get to fly in one. But I think it would be interesting to feel the air. That would be cool.
All right, Chris.
So
over
what
to
is
you.
that height if it's open canopy like that? What is
Mhm.
the height
Oh,
that
you
you
can.
go?
Oh, probably only up to 10,000 feet because that's where the oxygen starts to. Well, you might be able to wear oxygen separately in those, I would imagine,
Yeah.
but usually they stay pretty low.
Pigeon eaters,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It's like when you're on a motorcycle, you're catching the bug.
Keep your mouth.
Yeah,
Pigeon eater, little pigeons
they
flying.
do have the little. That's what the goggles are for, you know, and the like old school leather hat and the goggles and the scarf.
Like Red Baron,
That's right.
like the red.
Yes, that's what I want to fly. Just once, maybe twice.
Wow, how fun. So
I
we'll be
know.
seeing you at the next air show doing some of those
Yeah.
flips with Red Bull.
Well, no, I don't think so. Maybe. Oh, no.
That'd be awesome.
Wow. So once you went into the Air Force and you went through your pretend boot camp thing, I guess. I don't know. Your boot-
I could add, yeah. We in ROTC we only had to do a 4-week what did they call it? Field training is what they called it. Wow, that took a second to get there. But yeah, it was pretend boot camp. That's what my husband calls it too. He's like, "Your summer camp?" Yeah, my summer
Right,
camp. It was hard.
right. So then once you were in that, how long was it before you started training on the planes? Because I'm sure you had all
Oh.
the book study first and learning aerodynamics and all that.
Um, so after I commissioned and graduated, at the time they were backed up for pilot training. So I spent 9 months at Fort Hood being a casual lieutenant. So just doing odd jobs and helping them with paperwork at Fort Hood for 9 months. And then after that, then I started UPT. UPT, undergraduate pilot training, is a year long, almost exactly, or it used to be the version that I went through. It's changed since then. And they did phase 1 was probably 2 months long of sims and academics, and then you hit the flight line after that. They call it a fire hose effect because it's really a concentrated amount of information in a short amount of time. And some people weren't able to learn it all quick enough or fast enough or well enough, and they failed out. But I was lucky enough to make it through.
Well, you've always been super smart and studied well.
I
So
was a good student. I told my son that because he wants to be a pilot, and I'm like, "Well, you need to actually get your act together, mister."
maybe he will as he gets a little bit older and more focused.
I think so. My mom says actually that I was distracted as a teenager anyway, so there's hope.
Always hope, always hope. So then after you were able to start to fly, um did you have like certain hours that you had to put in before you could go solo, or how did that
Oh,
look?
that's different in the Air Force than in the civilian side. The Air
Okay.
Force has a strict syllabus, so there's so many rides in this block of education. So there were probably only, I don't know, 10 rides or so, and then we went solo in the T6, single ship solo, and then later we do learn the instrument after that. So like navigation and instrument, like learning to fly in clouds, kind of those rules. And then, yeah, for another the flying phase, the T6 flying portion was probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, and then after that, we went to the T1 or the T38 or the helicopters. So, after the T6, then we split off into whichever your next concentration would be in. So then we did also a formation solo. So we would learn to fly in formation together, like 10 feet from another airplane. And then they put you in that other airplane alone, which I thought was crazy. But, it builds confidence. And
Ready?
yeah, that was actually the most fun ride in my undergraduate training and even at Pitt. So I teach at instructor training now. So I had to go through pilot instructor training to teach the instructors, which is why I fly the T6 now. I didn't really explain that earlier. Why I'm in a primary airplane is because I'm teaching how to instruct. I'm teaching instructors how to instruct in the primary airplane. So I'm pretending to be a student sometimes. But anyway, so the formation solo was the most fun ride back then, decades ago, and also just, 5 years ago when I soloed again in formation in the T6.
Wow. So did you guys did you use simulators before?
Mhm.
Yeah, a lot of those.
A lot, yeah. They helped a lot too. So it actually does a good job. And now they use VRGs, like virtual reality videos, which they're very useful for the students to learn like ground references and the pattern and stuff like that. And they use VR sims, which are not as good, but they're okay. They're not as good as the traditional simulators. So for a while, they're trying to get rid of the traditional simulators, but I don't think they're able to do that.
Yeah, those are pretty cool. I've actually been in a simulator before. It was I got a tour over Alaska Airlines.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, and so there was a couple of us. It was like a drawing and I won.
Oh, fun.
So we were able to go in the simulator and yeah, it was pretty crazy. Obviously
It
the whole
moves.
dashboard that you've got going on. And then it was like I was trying to taxi, and you've got
Eh.
this lever, and I'm like, okay, I'm already trying to keep this thing straight
That's
because I
cool.
overcompensate, and then flying was pretty cool too.
That's neat. My son, I was able to take him to one of our T6 simulators don't move. So I was able to take him in one the other day and he's like, "This is your job? This is so cool." And he was flying around and I was trying to instruct him and he was not listening. But it was still fun. I like to do interviews like this or talk to kids about flying because it reminds me that it was my dream at one point because at some point it becomes a job and it's just kind of a grind and you're just living day to day like, "Oh, this is just the means to an end," but it really is it's a great gig.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, doing something that you love is huge, you
Yeah,
know?
but I mean, some people like, I have friends that are horse trainers, and I'm like, "Oh, that's great. You must love it." And even I mean, anything that you do day in and day out, it can lose its luster a little bit, like so it's nice to have a fresh perspective is what I'm saying. So I'm happy to talk to you about it.
Good. Be childlike, right?
I know, but yeah, you really do need to, like, remember sometimes.
Yeah, and especially like your son, how he's not listening and doing what he wants to do. That's part of learning too,
Mhm.
just getting the feel of it, of what's okay and what's not okay, and he's
Mhm.
place in the simulator,
Right.
you
That's
know?
true, yeah.
So
It's a good it's a good point, and I'm like, "You just can't crash it because I can't, like, reload the sim." So he's like, "Okay, it won't crash." This is funny.
how funny. So, I guess let's talk about some of your Air Force adventures. What kind of adventures have you had?
Um, well, so I was
Share.
lucky enough to be teaching the majority of my career, so I was a instructor pilot first in the T1, and then in the EC-130, I came in with some experience flying, obviously, in the T1, so they put me into an aircraft commander position initially, which was nice, and then an instructor there. So, I only deployed once, which was, strangely enough, probably one of my highlights of my career was deploying to Afghanistan because we had a hard crew. It was really nice to fly with the same people every single day because then you kind of knew each other. we gelled, and I was the boss, which was kind of fun. Um, to be oh, was I the only lady? I think I was. So it was interesting. Both of the crews that were deployed at the time had female aircraft commanders. So like the girls were the bosses of everything then, which was it was interesting and it was fun. And because I was the leader, the whole crew took on my like not personality, but my vibe, like I'm easygoing, generally speaking, try to do the job well. So somebody from the other crew flew with us once. They're like, "Man, you guys are like the Brady Bunch, and our crew is more like Family Guy or something." It cracked me up. So I'm like, "Oh, that's great." But I mean, speaking to that, you train for so long. I'm training people how to fly. I'm training people to fly approaches, to do fuel calculations, all of this stuff, right? But at that why that deployment was so cool is that I was finally doing a real job for a real reason. So we had real issues, real emergencies, real fuel problems, and it was like, "Oh, all this training that I have been doing has now fulfilled its purpose," which is like it was a really fulfilling deployment. Now, I've had other adventures, like fun stuff going to Oshkosh, the air show, and the T6 was the other really cool one that is probably another highlight of my career, where my dad got to marshal me in because he volunteers at Oshkosh. It's the EAA Air Venture, but we outside of Wisconsin call it Oshkosh, which is the city that it's in. But it's like the biggest air show in the United States. But anyway, that was really fun too. That's a long answer to your question.
We looked for you the last time we were out there.
Oh, really?
Anybody?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so big. Yeah. It's unreal.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. And it's so cool that because it's true. All the training has a purpose,
Mhm.
you know, and to see that fulfilled doing the deployment, it probably just like brought everything home.
Yeah.
It just this makes sense. This is the purpose. And, even though you're on like one part of it of, training others, they may be doing more deployments.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
so it's like so important that you are focused and just pouring into them everything that you can because they may need it. You know?
Right, exactly. And that's the thing that, like, that kind of is something that I learned later in my career is, the person across the desk from you is the most important thing when you're teaching. There's so many problems in the Air Force that you see as you spend time in the Air Force, leading, seeing bad leaders, seeing good leaders, seeing the Air Force change its mind on how to do pilot training was ridiculous, but I'm like, all I can do is teach this person in front of me to the best of my ability. And hopefully that helps save some lives at some point.
Yeah, and that's life in general. There's gonna be changes, and no matter where you're at, leadership changes,
Right. You may or
all
may not agree with it.
change. Right.
Mm.
Right, right. So who was someone that you really looked up to in the Air Force?
One of my favorite bosses was Lieutenant Colonel Benson. I was his exec, like his, we'll call it a secretary in Tucson. So I was his right hand person. But he was just like so kind and such a mentor. Like, I know he's busy. He didn't always have to take the time to be like, "Hey, let's talk about this situation," and like actually try to teach me and guide me and, just bring me along in my own leadership and education. And he was a pilot too, which not all squadron commanders in Tucson are pilots. Some of them are EWOs or navigators. So it was really cool to be under his wing for that time.
Yeah. So when did you decide that you wanted to teach?
Um, so my dad again kind of helped me and my husband too, actually. So we had really good friends in Del Rio at the time, which is Del Rio is where I went to undergraduate pilot training, Del Rio, Texas, which is, I call it the armpit of Texas. Some people may love Del Rio, but there's not a lot there. But the people there are just fantastic. So I graduated from UPT. I did pretty well. I ended up, I don't like saying it, but I was the DG of my class, the distinguished graduate. So I graduated in the number one position. And I like to just pat myself on the back. I was the only girl. So girls can fly airplanes too. But so I had the choice of any airplane because that's how they do it. So like you're racked 1 to 15, I think there was of us in T1s. And they're like, okay, the number one person gets their number one choice if we have it available. And I wanted to instruct, so I put FAPE as my number one choice, which is very rare. People don't like to get stuck in Del Rio. But my dad suggested, like, hey, my husband Jeff was deploying. I think we already knew he was deploying. He went to Iraq for a year and a half. And I didn't want to move and go to training and just like uproot my entire life when my husband was deploying for the first time, or maybe it was the second time. I don't know. He went to Georgia first, which I don't really count as a real deployment, but he does. So, but anyway, I didn't really want to do that. And my dad was like, you know what? It's really smart for you to teach first in a multi-engine aircraft, which the T1 has 2 engines, and to get all that, they call it pilot and command time, which is difficult to get when you're so young. So I was like, yeah, sure, let's just stay here and teach because that at least eliminates one variable, having to move and retrain, and that would have been extremely stressful at the time. And so
Right.
lucky enough, they chose me too. So I got to stay. But I really love teaching. I think through all of that, I've figured out that it's a passion of mine because when I wasn't doing it in the EC-130, I definitely missed it. And teaching like brand new lieutenants in the Air Force is just it's refreshing because it's usually their dream too, you know. So it's like, oh, I can give you all of the information that I have. But I enjoy teaching, and I'm back teaching now in the T6, which is more fun, I think. And the T1 is now divested, by the way, so it's old and gone out of the Air Force. And so is the EC-130. It's on its way out. So it makes me feel even older that all the planes I've flown are retired.
Yeah, I was going to say a joke and decided not to.
Oh, you should. I am not easily offended.
That's where you're like,
No.
back in my day, we didn't have planes.
No, I was
Oh, that's me.
better than retiring them instead of, the wheels falling off and the
Yeah,
going off.
yeah,
It seems
that is true. I mean, but they're still flying the 60s models T-38s. It's ridiculous. It's insane. And the B-52s, those things are older than dirt.
Well, in
But
some of the graveyards that you see with military planes, it's
oh,
almost
yeah.
sad. You look at it, you're like, oh, that's a lot of it's sadness. It's because they're not out there anymore doing what they did best. Does the Air Force what's the best word to put this? Do they refurbish older planes for any reasons that are maybe not active anymore, but refurbish them for events or anything like that? Is it just like they're done with them?
well, I don't know a whole lot about that process. Davis-Monthan, where I flew the EC-130, is actually where the graveyard is for the Air Force. So we used to fly over all of the old planes, and it was interesting to see all the skeletons there. They usually keep them. Actually, they have a very rigorous maintenance process. I knew that at least to maintain not that they don't rust. That's why they're in the desert. So they can use pieces from them or parts for other airplanes, or sometimes they sell them to other countries. Rarely do they put them in use for Air Force use again. But there were some brand new airplanes in the graveyard at one point that people were mad about that, but the only reason they were there is so they could be preserved to be sold to a different country. But they looked brand new. It was interesting. And then they left eventually.
Wow. So I have a question. So as an educator, doing in teaching people how to fly, the ins and the outs, the do's and the don'ts, based on classroom or virtual reality or simulation versus the hands-on experience. Now, when you're in the medical field or if you're a first aid or a first responder, they teach you all these things, right? And you know them until it happens. Is that kind of a similar thing, right? I mean, when you're up there doing it, or let's say red alert, something bad going down. I'll give you an example. I was a first aid instructor when I was younger, and not too long ago, I got a part-time job at like a YMCA. They told me I had to get certified. I was like, yeah, okay. So I went through the CPR class, and they kept saying the very first thing you need to do is, check the airway and everything else. And I just kind of shook my head, and they looked at me. They're like, "You don't agree?" I'm like, "No. The very first thing you do is don't panic."
Yeah.
Right?
And they do the
Because then
ACTs.
you're not thinking correctly. And I've actually have done CPR and saved somebody's life. And the overwhelming amount of either anxiety or the adrenaline rush that goes with that, you start losing focus. What's the first step? You don't think about that. Is that a similar? I mean, with pilots, right? You're in a giant metal object flying fast through a sky. That's a similar situation, right? I mean, hands on is a good educator into that as well.
Muscle memory.
And how do you break that down to your students?
Oh yeah. Well, unfortunately, some people can't deal with that stress, which is usually why they would wash out of UPT. Because most people have studied well, so they know what to do, but when they're presented in the situation, they make bad choices or no choice at all, which no decision is worse than making any sort of decision in the moment. But we just generally teach them the mantra of aviate, navigate, communicate, and then like regardless of what is happening with the airplane, somebody needs to be flying the airplane first. So because like flying into another airplane, if you're in formation, or flying into the ground is the biggest threat, generally speaking. And it's happened before. There's lots of aviation reports about people, like there's one famous one. They were trying to figure out a light bulb that was burnt out, and they didn't know if it was the gear that was malfunctioning or the light bulb, and they flew into the ground because nobody was paying attention. Just a little
Boy.
slow, steady spiral. Yeah, that one is pretty famous. But so that's why we tell the students like first you need to fly the plane and then figure out where you're going. And then generally speaking, everything is so like duplicated or backed up in the airplane. So like if you lose all your electronics, there are backup like aux batteries. If you don't have hydraulic power, you can use gravity to get the gear down. If you lose one engine, the airplanes fly fine on one engine, except for in the T6. Then we have an ejection seat and you can eject. But it's interesting to see where some people's brains go when things go wrong. And lots of things have happened to me, but it's almost like it is practice too. So like they make us do emergency simulators in the Air Force and at Delta. We do it every 9 months at Delta. And in the Air Force, we do it more frequently than that, where you practice all of the boldface, the memory items. You practice all of that in one sim. So it's like if all of this stuff goes wrong in an hour and a half and you're out flying the real airplane in the real world and one thing goes wrong, you're like, oh, I can deal with this just fine. So luckily, the aviation community is pretty safe for the most part because of all of that practice stress that we go through. That when the real thing happens, usually it's not nearly as big of a deal. Even like losing an engine over the ocean in Delta, we like talk about it every time we're over the ocean. We're like, okay, if we lose this, we go here, here, and here, and all right, we're gonna be fine. And people would probably be freaking out about losing an engine over the Atlantic, but
But it
I
can
mean,
fly with one engine.
you can fly with one engine. Granted, it's a lot lower than you can fly with two engines, but you can fly with one engine. And some of my friends ask me, they're like, what happens in this case or what happened in that case? I'm like, most of the time, the pilots are well trained. You're gonna be fine. accidents happen. And that's what they call the Swiss cheese model, where things just line up. Maintenance missed this, the pilots missed this, ATC missed this, and all of those holes just line up, and it's a numbers game. At some point of the millions of flights that happen each year, something bad might happen.
Yeah, and I think as a pilot, I know this from my past of just the what if games. If you're here and this happens, what if? And being
Yeah.
aware of your surroundings.
Mhm.
So
But
that where you're at.
yes. But they even practice, like, in the Air Force, we call them tabletop emergencies, where we give them a situation verbally, and then they have to, like, think through that thing and come to a logical conclusion, as we call it, to keep the airplane safe and the people safe. So we, like, not overemphasize, appropriately emphasize the emergencies.
Well, that's good. I mean, you got to do that.
Yeah.
So, have you ever ejected before or had
Oh,
to?
no. Well, no. I've only known one pilot ever that had to do that, and it is rare. It is super rare because, I mean, everything works so well 99.999% of the time that
Right.
the one time it doesn't, you're just like, "What happened?" But, then they fix it. So, but luckily they survived. So, even though their backs might have been messed up, because it is rough, but they lived. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when they got to the
Wow.
ground, they were like, "You just crashed a $20 million plane."
well, I talked to him because he was actually in one of my pit classes. I said, "Well, what happened? Like, did you?" Because we train for this stuff, right? I'm like, "Did you look up and see your chute, or did you, like, steer into the wind like they say to do?" He's like, "No, we said we're ejecting, and the next thing I knew, I was on the ground." So I think like you said, your muscle memory must kick in, or like they were pretty low too, so they only probably got a swing and a half out of the chute before
Wow.
they were on the ground. And he's like, "I think we landed in the trees." Because they didn't have any time. It was crazy. The
Yeah.
story was crazy, but
And
yeah,
then
I
plus
pray
with
that
adrenaline's flowing, it's like they
yeah,
might have even like remembered, even they could have done it and not like
right, remembered.
right. Right.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
What
yeah,
was your
that would be crazy.
what was your biggest close call?
Oh. Well, that was probably in Afghanistan. It was probably the scariest moment. We'll call that a close call. I'm thinking, because other stuff, like, we've happened, like, an engine shut down multiple times in the EC-130, but it had 4 engines, so going on 3 engines was not that scary. But we were on orbit, and we were flying through the same thing over and over again, same cloud over and over again. And then in Afghanistan, it's a very different, weather. I'm not a weather expert, but the thunderstorms there are much shorter. Don't ask me why, but they are way shorter than they are here in the States. So if here in the United States, if they're like 30,000 feet high, they're, I mean, pretty big, but you can get above them. If they're 40, they're big, big mamas, and you need to stay away from them. They probably have a lot of hail. They're much more severe. In Afghanistan, this tiny little cloud acts like it's a big thunderstorm here in the States. So we're flying through the same cloud, and then all of a sudden we just get lightning everywhere. Like, the St. Elmo's fire comes on the windscreen. So St. Elmo's fire looks like lightning on the windscreen, like it's just crackling. You can hear the ice just all of a sudden start hitting the windscreen. my
Oh.
my FO was eating beanie weenies at the time. It was cracking me up. So I'm like, I turned the autopilot off and I just turn around. I'm like, we got to get out of this thing now. And the engineer's talking to me like, okay, you're at this number of bank, you're at this airspeed, like, and my co-pilot threw his beanie weenies back, and he's like trying to back me up. I just turned around out of it, even though you're supposed to fly through it. I didn't think that made sense at the time. Um, we got out of it pretty quickly, but the weather phenomenons are actually the worst situations that I have ever been in airplanes, because they're usually unexpected. But we got out of it. We didn't fly through that cloud again. It was terrifying. No, we thought we got struck by lightning. We ended up staying the whole time to support our mission, but we thought for sure we had gotten hit by lightning, but we didn't. It was fine.
If you get struck by lightning, can the plane still fly? I guess it
Yeah.
depends where it's struck at.
Yes. A lot of the times, the only way you know is that there's an exit hole that looks like a black mark with like some. It just looked like it was burned. But generally speaking, the planes, because they're not grounded, obviously, it just goes through. If it hits, I've heard that it can hit electric something and then just mess up your electronics, but the engines still work just fine.
As long as the landing gear works, right?
Yeah, but even they can land gear up, so it's okay.
Oh, still
We'll survive. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, we still probably survive. And if all that fails, we even have parachutes in the EC-132. Not in the T1. We didn't have parachutes in the T1. But I pray that I'll never have to jump out of a plane. I'm actually scared too.
That's for fun and be in the skydiver?
No. My son was like, "You want to go skydiving when I turn 18?" I'm like, "I really don't."
There's no reason to jump out of a perfectly good.
No, I cannot.
He did that when he turned 18. He's like, yeah, I would do that. That's so
Did
cool.
you go?
Oh,
Did
I
you want to go?
watched him, videotaped him coming down.
I don't think I could do it. I don't know. I'd have to close my eyes the whole time.
I'm a pretty
Then you
big
don't
guy.
get to see
I'm pretty
everything.
sure they have to have a big chute for me. You know,
Yeah.
I don't even,
Ooh.
I'm like Mr. Key. You have to like drug me to even get me on a plane. I don't
Yeah.
mind flying, to go to different states and stuff like that. It's like a 3-hour flight or whatever. But it's when I'm up there. When I get past the point where I can still identify things on the ground, I feel I don't know why that is.
Oh, because you're afraid of heights,
I am.
right? My dad was a professional pilot, afraid of heights. It was
Really?
hilarious. He was terrified. He couldn't get on the roof.
I can't do it. Oh, yeah. I got a lot in common with him.
But I think I asked him once, like, what in the world? How do you do that? And he said, well, it's because the ground is right there. Like on a plane, your feet are still on the ground, even though the ground is the plane. So that's how he could mentally compartmentalize it, I suppose. I don't know. It was interesting.
I think if you could see it.
Yeah, it's the fear of the unknown.
Right. When you're that high up, it feels not real, maybe.
Yeah.
Or your brain doesn't trigger it. But listen, I'm the guy that puts the Christmas lights on only on the gutter.
Yep.
Not the rest of the house.
Like from the ground. Just
right. I'm like, I'm not 20 anymore and I won't bounce. And if I do, it's over. And so it's usually like, just up that insurance policy if you decide to, oh, thanks, honey.
Yeah.
That's good.
It's definitely the fear of the unknown. I actually worked in like a convenience store gas station and I was robbed.
Oh my
And
goodness.
the guy came in and he had his gun right there at me.
Oh
He
my
stopped
goodness.
me and I'm joking back to him because I just seem to joke all the time. And then obviously I gave him the money because they said that's what you're supposed to do is give him the money.
Wow.
And he told me to turn around and get on the ground. And that's when I got scared because I was like,
wow.
see, what if he shoots me in the back? I could do anything if he shot me in the front,
Right.
Wow.
There was a little bell on the door. So when he left, then it was like, okay, he's gone. Then I pushed the emergency button,
Wow.
So it was just like, it was so crazy though, just that it was like, how come I wasn't scared when he came this way, but when I was turned, I was scared.
Yeah, because you didn't know, you can't see, you don't know. Is it just coming?
Yeah. So it's the fear of the unknown. Like we somehow have control if we can.
Right.
We don't.
No, we don't.
We do in our heads.
Your stories, I tell you, it's like the adventures of Chris Boston.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Different things that you've gone through.
No idea.
And speaking of the unknown, so I'm going to ask this question because I ask any pilot this question is, and listen, I'm going to put out air quotes because you can't see them. If you can't answer the question, and you can't, that's okay too. Being in the air quite a bit and getting that windshield time, have you ever seen anything strange?
I wish I had. I make a joke. My farrier, he talks to me about chemtrails. A farrier, well, he trims my horse's feet.
Oh, okay.
So
About horses now.
yeah, it's part of my life. But because sometimes I'll have to stand out there with him for like an hour while he's trimming the horses, so we just talk about whatever. So he asked me specifically about chemtrails, which I I explained to him those are not they're not a thing. Like, meaning we don't put stuff into the air at a certain temperature with a certain amount of moisture in the air. When anything is disturbed, and you'll see, I'm sure you've seen it where you freeze a bottle of water almost to the point where it's frozen and then you smack it and it turns into crystals. That is the same concept that happens in the air for chemtrails, as people call it. They are contrails and they are scientific. So trust me, we're not putting anything into the air. But anyway, I've seen stuff. I told him this story. I'm like, I'm disappointed I've never seen anything weird, because it seems like everybody else has, or at least enough people that make the news. And aliens must not like me, because I'm disappointed that I have only seen things that I know what they are. You see weird stuff like, okay, so over the Atlantic at night, sometimes there are ships way on the horizon that, because it's just ocean for miles and miles. They look weird. I will say that. So there's been a couple times where I was staring at something for a long time, like, "What is that? Am I finally seeing it?" And no, it's just a ship. Or, like, I've seen the Northern Lights too, and those are really cool. I've seen other airplanes that look weird. Oh, rockets when they're shot out, like when SpaceX is doing whatever, you can see those for miles, and they look really weird, but
Oh,
I've
wow.
never seen any aliens. I wish I had. I don't know. One day, maybe I will.
Wow. Wow. Now, what about a funny situation? What's the funniest situation? Was it the Beanie Weenies?
That makes me laugh to this day. He said, "I'll never eat him again." And he didn't. 'Cause we'd be up there for hours, so you have to eat on the plane too. So the longest flight was 14 hours. That was it was horrible.
Wow.
We had to do air refueling twice on that flight, and I was zonked. I was exhausted. But I can't think of anything particularly funny off the top of my head beyond that one. It'll probably come to me later. I laugh at students a lot, I'll say that. So when I'm teaching or they're teaching me, I I tend to make light of the situation sometimes, or like, "Oh, you can be taught," or like, "That's not it." But I said the only way I'm gonna do this job is if I'm having fun, so, and I think they appreciate it, they seem to like it. They learn anyway, and I have a good time.
And plus, probably helps break the ice with the nervousness, instead of like cracking the whip, you messed up. Oh, great. I'm
Mhm.
worse than I was before,
Right. And I try to teach like the person I would like to learn from, like, so yes, teach me what's right and what's wrong, but I like to also encourage them when they're doing the right things. So be a little bit of the cheerleader, like, "Oh, that was excellent. Good job."
Yeah.
And then teach to the best of their ability. That not only are they doing a good job, I'll tell them how they can do it even better too, which I appreciate and stuff like that. Because even now, after if 16, 17 years in the Air Force and and reserves, I'm still learning, and that's what I think I like. It makes me feel young. Keeps me young anyway, to keep learning, doing new things.
Does it take you longer to learn now than when you were younger?
Yeah, yeah. Surprisingly, every time I learn a new airplane, it's a very humbling experience, and learning the Delta way and the civilian way and then that new airplane was extremely difficult for me. And I was like, "Man, I swear I was smarter than this," but it really is a muscle that you lose if you don't continue learning. And my husband just went through physical therapy school, and he's like, "This is really a lot harder than it used to be to learn and retain than when I was younger, or in practice, we'll even call it, you know?"
Yeah, and you're not even that old. I totally because I'm doing this new organization. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just brain dead constantly.
Well, I mean,
No.
breaking it down for just the same, technology, you blink your eyes twice, it's changed. And so to try to keep up, that's why, I have my daughter I got a youngster hair and neck. It's like, it sounds weird. Like,
Get help.
can you do this for me, please?
I
Because
know.
yesterday technology was one way, but today it seems
It's different.
right.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I'm trying to do my best to keep up.
Yeah, well, I can imagine how that would change too, as far as technology on airplanes.
Oh, not even that's the iPad. Like we went from paper everything to iPad everything, and I'm like, I feel so old.
Right, right. I was, somebody, what was it? It's a fax machine was brought up not too long,
Nah.
and I was like, that's right next to my 8-track player.
Yeah.
And a kid
Don't
was,
even,
what the hell's an 8-track player?
yeah, they don't even get the joke.
Yeah, we're done. We're done talking now.
That's the lieutenants I teach now. We have the FAPEs come through T6 pit, and I'm like, when were you born? Do I even want to know? It's in the 2020s now. I'm like, oh my gosh.
No, I still have a pair of shoes from 2020.
At least turntables are coming back. So when I say
Oh,
broken record, then at least people are starting
now
to
they get
understand.
it.
Right. Well, we had because we're also a music studio, and some of the young kids, they watch Stranger Things, which there was a Metallica song in. They're like, hey, you got to check out this band called Metallica. And I was like, shut up.
Our son did that with a group with Santana. He was like,
No way.
new band. And it was like,
New.
having a hard time about, oh, hey, there's this new band, Santana.
That is hilarious.
Good God.
You got to pick on the kids.
As we're
I
all
know.
these conversations at the graveyard for airplanes.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Such is life.
Well, we're coming to a close here. Is there any one last thing that you'd like to share?
Oh man, that's a broad
I know.
question.
So I didn't have to think of a question.
Well, how about this? I got one for you. To close it out, if, to any youngster out there that was thinking about different branches of the military, what would be the go-to speech from you to say Air Force is a good way to go for you?
Chair Force, you mean?
The chair force.
Air Force.
Oh.
Champagne, strawberries.
Uh-huh. I'll answer that one kind of twofold because the reason I'll answer it for the pilot question. You didn't ask it, but I'll answer it just for a question.
Sure, yeah.
People always tell me, and this is kind of answering Chris's question. I tell them I don't lead with, "Hey, I'm a pilot," because I think it's obnoxious. But when people find out I'm a pilot, they're like, "Oh, I wanted to be a pilot when I was a kid," or "I've always thought about that." And I always ask like, "Well, why didn't you do it?" But I think generally the thing is people just don't know how to get there. And I was lucky enough to have my dad kind of guide me and the Air Force to pay for it because it can be very expensive. But I'd like to all the people out there thinking like, yeah, I think I'd like to try it. I would say at least try it. Like there's so many schools now too that have aviation programs that might cost a lot of money to go through, but my Delta job pays a lot of money. So you'll get it back. So I would say just at least don't regret not trying it. Go try it. As far as the Air Force goes, man, I can't say enough good things about the Air Force in compared to all the other branches. If you want to be a pilot, particularly, the Navy, you'll be on a boat like for 6 months. I'm like, if you want to be in a cramped quarters with a bunch of other dudes, which I no, thank you. Go for it, but you'll see the world. Now, granted, they have way better bases because 'cause they're on the coast, but you'll be on a boat at some point, and sounds like pure torture talking to my Navy students because we have a couple Navy T6 pilots. And the Marines are hardcore. So if you're really gung ho and like to eat crayons, this is the joke that we always make, you could go for that. They make fun of us too, so it's all in good fun.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
the army is difficult. If you want to fly helicopters, probably the army is the way to go. But the ability to get a job after, like in the major airlines, is not as easy if you go to helicopters. So if you're looking for a job and then a nice follow-on job, the fixed wing is the way to go, which is mostly the Air Force. So it's been a huge blessing to be in the Air Force, and I think there's also the Space Force, which I know very little to nothing about. So, but I think they're mostly dealing with satellites and that kind of stuff, more computer-based
The
things. So
only thing I know about
Yeah.
Space Force is all the other branches makes fun of them.
I know. So maybe they're now the new Air Force. So yay.
I mean, Air Force got a level up on that one, I think. For the most
Yeah.
I do have one more question because both the Navy, because we had the Navy mom
Yep.
that her son wanted to fly, and so he
Mm.
went into the Navy. And so I don't know if you know, but you said that you do have some Navy students.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
do they go through the Air Force program if they want to, or how that
We
works?
used to have a sister, like at Corpus Christi, we used to have like a joint T-44 program, but Navy has their own entire undergraduate pilot
Oh,
program. They also fly T-6s, which is the plane that I fly first, but then they have a different fighter bomber follow on. We have the T-38 and they have the I don't remember what it is. It's another mini fighter looking plane. And they have helicopters there too. So does the Coast Guard actually. But I think actually I take that back. The Coast Guard pilots go through Navy pilot training first and then they go to the Coast Guard after that, I think.
okay. Okay.
And the Marines too. I think that all the Marines, Coast Guard, Navy go through their pilot training and the Air Force has a separate pilot training. But then we share pilots in this particular case in order to like diversify. I don't know exactly why they do it, but it's interesting to talk to the Navy pilots. They have different rules.
Yeah, they have different
Yeah.
planes too. Their own planes, I should say, not different.
Yes, yeah.
Their own planes. And I remember that episode where we had the mom of the Navy, and his answer was he didn't go to the Air Force because the Navy had cooler planes. Now,
Yeah.
yeah. So you're like agreeing with it. You're like, oh yeah, yeah.
Well, okay, so yeah, I think that the Blue Angels are way cooler than the Thunderbirds, which I might get kicked out of the Air Force for saying that.
That's how you know.
But
That's
yeah.
I have a friend, and I'll make this short, but I have a friend that when I was a little bit younger, he went and got his pilot license. Now this kid through high school was the crazy kid, right? He was the one that climbed the side of the apartment building and
Mhm.
off the roof onto the patio with a 6-pack of beer because he was the entrance kid. And then he got his pilot license. Like, hey, listen, you got to jump in this plane with me one time. I'm like, Ralph, you're missing a headlight on your car. Your phone is cracked. Your tablet's cracked. I think I'll pass. Hard pass.
Yeah.
So he's done, quite a bit. And now he builds drones, his own drones, and does like for farming. He sends his drone out and it does the land measurements or whatever it is. But yeah, he's still alive. So he's still doing it. But I know that the moment I set foot on that, but that would be the duct tape plane. There's no
No way.
just be careful about who you're getting a ride with. That's all I'm saying, awesome. Thanks for being with us today.
Yes. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah, it was a good time. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and head out, and we will catch you next time. See ya.
Okay.